I think nihilistic would be the right word, right? Where it's just such a downer, kind of being like, there's no point. You may as well not even try to be a liberated woman because look what it gets you, you know, is kind of the vibe I got from the book. Hello, and thank you for joining me here today at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about In the Cut by Susanna Moore, published in 1996, and I'm comparing it with the movie directed by Jane Campion, released in 2003. And this subscriber pick was suggested by 7 Days at Sea, and even though the end of April brings us to the end of subscriber month, I will actually have 2 to 3 more subscriber picks in May, and then throughout the summer I'll be doing more from that list of suggestions. So definitely stay tuned and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. And again, thank you to everyone who did submit suggestions to that post I made. There were a lot of good ones and it was really hard to choose, and 85% of the reason why I chose this one is because the movie is directed by Jane Campion, who directed The Power of the Dog. And that book and movie are just so fantastic. Like, she did such a great job adapting that book and staying faithful to the book while also just making an incredible movie. And so when I saw she directed this, I was definitely curious to check it out and to see if, you know, her being a great director at adapting books just tracks for her. And so, yeah, so that is a huge reason why I chose this one. It's also a thriller, and I feel like I love thrillers, but I feel like I don't often cover them. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity to finally talk about a thriller. It also does have Mark Ruffalo, who I like, and then Meg Ryan is in the lead role. But she was reminding me a lot of Nicole Kidman, like almost like she was trying to mimic Nicole Kidman in a way. And then afterwards, I saw that Kidman was initially attached to this movie, but then she dropped out or something. And so then I was wondering if her Kidman-like acting was intentional, since Kidman originally had the role. I'm not sure, but yeah, she was reminding me of Nicole Kidman. And I am going to begin with a spoiler-free review, which I usually only do a spoiler-free section if it's a new release or if it's a book or a movie that I really love and think you should check out. Here, I'm mainly doing it because it is a mystery thriller, and so I want to give you an idea of what this book and movie is, and if it sounds like something you like, you know, I want to keep it spoiler-free. That way the ending won't be ruined for you. And so if you are someone who likes erotic thrillers, then you should read this book. If that's your thing, I think you will love this. I also think that if you watched the movie and you liked it well enough, then you should read the book, and vice versa. And as said, this is an erotic thriller, so there is a fair amount of sex in it. However, I thought Susanna Moore, the way she weaved the sex into the plot and the themes of the story, you know, it was done in such an intentional way, right? And so it's not there just to be a steamy scene. It also serves a purpose. And you could say that for the movie as well. And this book is making a statement about the gender roles we have. And in general, this book just had more depth to it than I expected. And in some ways, it reminded me of Gillian Flynn. So if you enjoy Gillian Flynn books, I think you are also someone who should check this one out. But I did want to say that this is a disturbing story because it does deal with a serial killer, and so there are some grisly scenes as far as that goes. And I did think the mystery aspect was well done because there are a number of suspects, and there is one person in particular where it seems so obvious that they must be the killer. But then I was like, well, if it seems that obvious, then it can't possibly be them, right? Because she wouldn't make it that obvious. But then I was like, well, maybe she made it that obvious just so we would assume that it can't possibly be them, which would then make the reveal of it being them all the more surprising, you know? So it definitely kept me guessing, as you can tell. And yeah, so I thought the mystery aspect was well done. And yeah, to wrap up my spoiler-free thoughts, if you like dark, gritty mysteries, then I think this is one that you should check out. But from here on out, I will be getting into the plot details, which means there will be spoilers going forward. And I will begin with the basic plot because up until the end, the book and movie are very similar, but the endings are very, very different. But both begin with Frannie, who is a teacher. I think she teaches like freshman college, it seems like, and she's an English teacher, and she has an obsession with words, which I thought was just a really nice touch to her character in both book and movie. But at the beginning of both book and movie, Frannie is at a bar and she happens upon a man who is getting a job from a woman, and it's in like a dark room, so she can't really see his face at all, but she does see that he has a 3 of spades on his wrist. And then she sees later, and she can like kind of see the woman's face, and she finds out later that that woman was killed that very night. And then there's 2 detectives who are questioning her about this murder because she lived right by the bar, but also the bartender told the detectives who had been in there that night. And one of the detectives, named Malloy, he has a tattoo of a 3 of spades on his wrist. So she's like, wow, like he was the one I saw that night and he happened to be with that woman. And then she died later that evening. However, she does not tell him that she saw him with the woman, and he doesn't act like he had known the woman at all. And it had been dark, like I said, so she hadn't seen his face, and so she assumes that he also hadn't been able to see her face, and so it's just this secret that she is keeping. And yeah, throughout the story, more women are killed, including Frannie's friend, and Frannie herself is also attacked from behind, so she doesn't see the killer and she is able to get away. And throughout all of this, Frannie and the detective Malloy begin having sex, even though at one point she does find out in the book that he is married. In the movie, she accuses him of being married, but he never straight up says yes or no. But in the book, he does say that he is married. And her friend Pauline, the one that was killed, earlier in the story, she had given her a charm bracelet. And when she got attacked, one of the charms had come off on her bracelet, and she had seen Malloy later that night and told him where she was attacked. And then at the end of the story, Malloy comes over to her house and she handcuffs him while they're having sex. And then when she goes to get the keys to unlock him, she finds her missing charm in his pocket. And he claims oh, I went back to where you were attacked and I found it. I keep meaning to give it back to you. But she's like, you were the one who attacked me, and that's why you have my charm bracelet. So she freaks out. She does not unlock him, obviously, and she runs out of her apartment. And then his partner, Rodriguez, he is there downstairs, and she runs into him and he's like, come with me, I'll take you somewhere safe. However, she finds out too late that Rodriguez is the killer. He too has a 3 of spades tattoo, so he was the one that had been with the woman in the bar. And he and Malloy have been partners for so long, so that's why they have the matching tattoo. But yeah, so she realizes this too late, and in both he takes her to this secluded spot where he goes fishing. And in the book, he then cuts her and she dies. So the book ends with her death. Whereas in the movie, she has a gun because she has Malloy's jacket and he has a gun in the pocket. And so she's able to shoot Rodriguez. And then she's able to make it back to her house. And Malloy is still there, handcuffed to a pipe on the wall. And so she walks into her apartment and then she lays down beside him. And that is how the movie ends. And of course, the ending is the biggest change here, where in the movie Frannie lives, in the book Frannie had died. And I will be getting into that a bit more later in the video, but first there are some other changes I wanted to get into, beginning with Pauline, her friend. So in the book, Pauline and Frannie, they're both women in their mid to late 30s, and they seem pretty jaded about sex and just life in general. And they also talk about their sex lives a fair amount, but they don't get emotional about it. And the bracelet that Pauline gives to Frannie in the book was a bracelet that had belonged to Pauline's aunt. And she says how the aunt had gotten pregnant, but then she got rid of the baby, and the guy whose baby it was, he had given her this bracelet in celebration of it. And the bracelet has different abortion related things on it. And she tells Frannie that the bracelet is bad luck. But then in the movie, Pauline and Frannie are actually half sisters, so they have the same father. And in the movie, Pauline is much more emotional. We hear about a doctor she has been sleeping with, but he is married. And she also ends up stalking his wife. And she is just very, like I said, very emotional about this guy she thinks she's in love with, who is trying to break things off with her. And she even has to go to court because he's putting a restraining order out. Whereas in the book, she was not like this at all. And in the movie, the bracelet she buys for Frannie, she buys it specifically for Frannie. And it's a courtship bracelet. So all of the charms have something to do with courtship, and both of them have a baby carriage on it, and the baby carriage is what goes missing in both book and movie. So yeah, she was just a bit more of a mess, I would say, in the movie than she had been in the book. And yeah, with the father, we hear how he was married multiple times, but he also had children with women he never did marry. He never married Pauline's mom. And so he would just basically hop from one woman to the next. And Frannie talks about how her mom never got over the heartbreak of being left. And we see flashbacks in the sepia tone of Frannie's mom and the dad, proposing and falling in love basically. And it's while they're ice skating. And then later in the movie though, we get another sepia flashback scene to her parents. However, here the mom falls while ice skating, and then the dad skates through and cuts her legs. And this is obviously symbolic of, the way he would hurt the women he was with, basically. And then I also want to talk about Cornelius Webb, because in both book and movie, she has a student named Cornelius, and he's constantly trying to meet up with her, either because she's working on a book about slang, and so he's always telling her like, oh, I have new slang words, like new street slang for you for your book. But then he's also working on a paper about John Wayne Gacy, and so he's like, oh, I need help with this paper, so I need to meet with you after school. And she has a very casual demeanor, and so she just lets students meet her at her apartment. But then Cornelius seems to take advantage of this, and he is one of those like weird people that is just always hanging around her. And in the book, we hear more about this paper he is writing, and we actually read the paper itself, which he writes from the perspective of John Wayne Gacy. And in both book and movie, near the end, he shows up at her apartment and they begin kissing. However, she's been drinking and she tells him, like, she stops it, being like, wait, no, I don't want this to happen. And then he gets aggressive, being like, you've been messing with me ever since I met you, and blah, 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 and just scaring Frannie. However, he does ultimately leave and she's fine, but it's this interaction that starts to make her nervous in both book and film. And yeah, in both book and movie, you could kind of see that they are trying to have him be one of the possible suspects. However, I never actually believed it would be him, but his obsession with John Wayne Gacy was an interesting aspect, which the book focuses on more. I'm not really sure if there was a deeper meaning to that, or if it was just a way for us to suspect him. Like, why is he so into this guy? But yeah, let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments. And then we also have John Graham in book and movie. And in the movie, he is this creepy guy that she has had sex with once or twice. And now he's stalking her and even breaks into her apartment at one point. And so he's just this creepy guy she doesn't want around. And this is different because in the book, he is just a friend of hers who she willingly hangs out with. And so yeah, he's kind of odd in his own way, but he wasn't the stalker that he was in the movie. But also to talk about Frannie. So in the book, it is a first person narrator, so we hear it from her perspective, and she came across kind of apathetic and detached. And even when something tense is happening, like her being attacked, she tells us about it in this unemotional way. And even when she tells us about finding her friend dead, Pauline, even that is told in a detached way, pun intended. And when I say she's detached, I don't mean that she doesn't care about her well-being, but yeah, she just felt detached from the story. And maybe that makes sense for the book considering she's dead. She's a dead person telling us this story. So maybe that was the intention of the way it was written. But yeah, it just came across very unemotional. And it was interesting too because it's set in New York City, but it felt almost like this dark alternate version of New York City. And granted, I don't live in New York City, so maybe this is accurate. Depending on where you live, maybe it does feel very dark and dangerous, but it almost felt like this dystopian alternate version of New York City that I was reading about because the vibe of it just felt so edgy and dangerous and different, even before the murder happens. But of course, after the murder has taken place, the first one, then we understand why it feels this way, and it's because Frannie knows there's a killer on the loose. But even before that, it just had this weird, gritty, dark vibe to it. But yeah, in the movie, I didn't think Frannie came across as a detached character. She seems more invested in things, kind of like how Pauline was more emotional, right? Like in the book, Pauline wasn't getting hung up on any specific guy and she wasn't stalking people, Yeah, both characters were just more emotional in one way or another in the movie. And yeah, to talk about the ending a bit more, so when Frannie kills Rodriguez and then returns to her apartment, I kept waiting for us to cut back to her at the lighthouse and see that she was actually dead and that this was just her like dead fantasy or something. But no, she lives at the end of the movie, which was a huge surprise. Granted, when I read the book, I was shocked that she dies at the end. Like I had not expected that. But considering the book and just the way the book was, I realized I shouldn't have been surprised because that is a very fitting end for this book in particular. And yeah, I thought the movie would keep it the same. So I was surprised that she lives. But in the movie, when she's talking to Rodriguez out on the street, Malloy, he is up in the apartment and the window is open so he can hear her talking. And she tells him like, he has the 3 of Spades tattoo, blah, blah, blah. She tells him why she thinks it was him. But when Malloy hears this, he knows Rodriguez has that tattoo. And so he's putting it together, but he can't do anything to save her because he's handcuffed. And so I thought, because we see that he hears what she says, I thought that he was going to end up escaping somehow and he was going to burst in and save the day and rescue her, which would have been so cheesy. So I am glad that if they chose for her to live, I'm glad that at least they didn't have Malloy run in and save the day, and I'm glad she was able to rescue herself instead. And yeah, this book and movie definitely focus a lot on sexuality and the dynamic between men and women. Like I said, sex plays a big part of this story. You know, we hear Pauline and Frannie talk about their sex lives, and then we have the relationship going on between Frannie and Malloy, and then the stories Malloy shares. And then also, this is unique to the movie. In the movie, the killer Rodriguez, the thing he will do is put an engagement ring on a woman and then he kills her. And then Malloy also proposes to Frannie at one point in the movie. Not seriously, but still, he proposes. And then you have John, who is stalking her, wanting to be with her. And so, yeah, we just have multiple men. And Cornelius, who is always hanging around following her. And so, yeah, we just have multiple men in Frannie's life who are trying to control her in one way or another. And we also have characters who are telling her like where she should or shouldn't go and what she should or shouldn't do in order to keep herself safe. But she doesn't listen to them, and she still just goes about her life in a normal way. But I didn't see that as Frannie not caring about her life. I saw it as Frannie rejecting the idea that because she's a woman, she therefore has to live in fear and that she can't do or go where she wants to go and do what she wants to do. She's just like, no, like I'm going to live my life. I'm not going to live in fear just because I'm a woman. And then, yeah, we have the oral scene at the start where the man is obviously being the dominant one, wanting to make sure he gets what he wants. But then we have the scenes between Malloy and Frannie. And in those scenes, you know, Malloy, he's getting his pleasure too, of course, but Frannie's pleasure is a priority. And in both, he says that the reason he's such a good lover is because when he was 15, a woman in her late 20s basically molested him, started having sex with him, and told him how to do it. We hear about this in the movie as well, but the book went a bit more into it. But yeah, he was literally molested as a 15-year-old. And yet the book and movie don't talk about it as if it was sexual assault, like it's talked about in just a normal way, as if this wasn't a strange thing that happened. And in the book, she even is talking to Pauline, being like, oh, the men who are the best lovers are the ones who were taught by an older woman. And yeah, I feel like this must have been intentional too. Like I wasn't quite sure. Like this is such an upsetting thing, right? Like any older woman who's interested in a 15-year-old has something wrong with her. And yet it's not seen that way, right? And so the way it was talked about was so weird, but I thought maybe that was the point. But yeah, just the way it was talked about in such a cavalier way, I guess, when it's like, man, like that lady was a sicko if she was being with you when you were that young. But anyway. But yeah, in the book specifically, also Rodriguez, right before Frannie dies, he makes a joke about Eve from like Adam and Eve. And I wasn't entirely sure what Moore intended with this joke. Obviously, it was very demeaning to women and kind of making a statement about, you know, in general, girls are more often taught to be ashamed of their bodies than men are. And so I feel like that was kind of what she was going for, like a message along those lines. Obviously, it dealt with the female bodies. And this whole story deals a lot with the female body because women are always the targets and then they're always like slashed and cut. And it's interesting too because the women's bodies are disarticulated too by this killer, by Rodriguez. And so the fact that they're disarticulated and to articulate, right, to be able to speak and to be able to put words to how you feel, even though disarticulated has nothing to do with the way you speak, it's like something with the bones, but still the wording is interesting, right? And words play such a key part in this story. And so yeah, there is definitely something there to the killer disarticulating the women. And again, maybe that is symbolic of men taking away women's voices. So yeah, I definitely think there is something there. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot here. So if you have read the book specifically, or even if you've seen the movie, but specifically people who have read the book, if you have better ideas about what some of this symbolism means and what some of these themes are and what Moore's intention was, definitely comment down below and let's talk about it. And yeah, to talk about the ending once more when I come to book versus movie, because on one hand, I can appreciate that Jane Campion chose to have Frannie live because this is a story, again, about the gender roles and how women live in fear, can live in fear because of their bodies and because they can be attacked and whatever, all of this stuff. And so having Frannie live in the end, and she kills this man who kind of embodies men who are evil. She ends up killing him and succeeding. And so I can appreciate a more positive ending to a story like this. However, I'm going to assume that it was the studios who wanted Frannie to live because usually that's the way it goes, right? The studios are the ones who are like, we need a happy ending here. So I would not be surprised if Jane Campion had wanted her to die in the end, but then her decision was overruled. But regardless, part of me does like that she lives in the end. And yet at the same time, you know, the book, it's a downer and a very nihilistic ending to be like, and Frannie dies. She doesn't even succeed in this world. The misogyny going on, and the dangers of the world she lives in and how it's not safe to be a woman who embraces their sexuality and who is independent, right? And so she gets punished for what she is and what she represents is kind of how I read it. And so even though that is, again, such a depressing ending, I can also appreciate it. I think nihilistic would be the right word, right? Where it's just such a downer, kind of being like, there's no point. You may as well not even try to be a liberated woman because look what it gets you, is kind of the vibe I got from the book. The ending of the movie was a bit too cheesy in some ways, like at least Malloy didn't save her, so there's that, but still it seemed a bit too cheesy, I guess. I don't know. I didn't love it. And even though I'm trying to like it by seeing it having a positive message, ultimately I think I do prefer the book ending. And the other changes the movie made, like even with Pauline and everything, like I was neutral on all of that. I wasn't super attached to the details of the book, and so I was fine with them making changes. And honestly, up until the end, the changes they made were pretty mild, I would say. So all in all, I will say that the book wins between book and movie, and yet at the same time, this is a great adaptation. And if you like one, you should check out the other. So yeah, that wraps up my thoughts on this book and movie. Share your thoughts down below in the comments. This was a really interesting one that had not been on my radar. So thank you again to 7 Days at Sea for suggesting this. And yeah, let me know, what do you think of these endings? Which do you prefer? Do you hate that she lives and it's such a Hollywood ending with the movie? Or did you like it? And did you like that it had a positive message? Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And if you have not yet subscribed, definitely subscribe, like this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.